Aiy-yu-kwee, Malita, and this is my channel, The Midnight Librarian. And today I will be talking about my February 2021 wrap-up. Slightly different angle, same chaos. So my desk has been set up, the hutch is almost ready, it's put together, it just needs to be connected to the desk. So therefore it's not stable yet and I cannot start organizing. In fact, I need to clear some of this out so we can move the desk back to be able to secure the hutch. You're gonna get a mix of videos in different locations just because I did pre-film some before everything changed. I filmed before the hutch came together, so bear with me. I apologize for the lighting now because this is not the best. However, this is what I can get with the chaos going around me right now. So for February 2021, I did participate in the VaLITines Readathon hosted by Kate over at Chaptercviii, where she basically is a readathon that kind of has the theme of Valentine's Day but doesn't necessarily focus on romance. It just focuses on the love and enjoyment of reading. So that was really fun. I enjoyed the themes of it. I had an ambitious TBR. I think there was 13 books originally on my TBR. I managed to get 7 of the books read from that TBR, so I'm actually pretty happy about that. And then I didn't end up doing a bullet journal review for the month of February. I just wasn't feeling it. I wanted to illustrate, but illustrating in a bullet journal for me it's completely different than illustrating, say, like on illustration board or whatever. I feel like there's more precision and like just a lot I need to plan out beforehand, while with illustrating in general I can just kind of have fun and let loose. So let's get into my reading. For the month of February, I completed 9 books, which is amazing. With those 9, I read 2,666 pages. Ratings for these books, I have 0 1 star, 0 2 stars, I have 2 3 stars, 1 3.5 star, 4 4 stars, 1 4.5 star, and 1 5 star, which equates to an average rating of 3.89 for the month. For genres, I have 3 contemporaries, 1 graphic novel, 1 historical, and 3 science fictions, and 1 nonfiction. For format, I have 4 audiobooks and 5 physical books. And then in terms of audience, I read 7 adult and 2 young adult. In terms of own voices, I feel like after digging as much as I could with the information provided by the authors, I have 7 own voices reads, which is pretty awesome. And I believe it's African, Indigenous, Black, and Irish. Oh, and South American. Of these authors, 2 of them were debuts, 2 I've read from before, and 5 of them were new to me. So like I said before, I participated in the VaLITines Readathon, and with those prompts I picked out 13 books, which is kind of a lot. So with that, I was also still participating in Buzzwordathon and had 3 books chosen for that. I also had several arcs that I had wanted to get to. Of those 3 arcs, I read 1 of them. The other I just wasn't feeling, and the third I had attempted and it just kept going over my head, so I've put it aside for right now and to see if I'm able to get into it later, but I have a feeling that I won't. The first book I read was Recursion by Blake Crouch. This is a Book of the Month book that I received back in 2019. And this is like one that really surprised me for the month. I wasn't really expecting to enjoy it as much as I did. I listened to this via my library, and it's narrated by John Lindstrom and Abby Craden. And we are following 2 perspectives in a world very similar to our own. But what's going on is that there is something spreading. It's called false memory syndrome, and people are finding themselves in a life that they know and they understand, but they have memories of another life that they have also lived, even though they know that that hasn't happened. Like, they're still conflicted, and so because of this, there are people that are able to handle it and are dying by suicide. So we are following Barry, who is an NYC cop and who's trying to dig up more information on false memory syndrome and is trying to wrap his mind around it, and feels like there's something deeper to it than society is perceiving. And we are also following Helena Smith, as she's involved with false memory syndrome. She is a neuroscientist that studies memory. So with that, there are multiple content warnings. Yeah, there are quite a few content warnings for loss of a child, suicide ideation, suicide, gun violence, Alzheimer's, death of parents, nuclear war, terrorism, graphic depictions of death and injury, and death of a significant other. So bear that in mind before going into this book. Like I said, this one really surprised me. I wasn't really expecting to enjoy this. Science fiction tends to worry me, and N.K. Jameson seems to be the one that I am slowly getting into for science. N.K. Jameson and Aiy-yu-kwee seem to be two authors that I'm like kind of grappling to when it comes to entering into science fiction. But this one, holy cow. This was my most surprising read of the month, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was complex, it was investing and hopeful, and also heart-wrenching, and it was just more than I had originally anticipated. Whew, it was a whirlwind. So I gave this 4.5 out of 5 stars. There was just a couple instances where I was just like, wait, what? Despite it being about false memory syndrome and have science fiction elements to it, there's just a couple things that took me out of the story and that I found a little distracting, but ultimately I really, really enjoyed this book. So Recursion fulfilled sharing is the prompt for VaLITines Sharing is Caring, which is to read a prompt from another readathon, which was Buzzwordathon, of which I kind of took the prompt pretty loosely. So February's prompt for Buzzwordathon was color, so like Priory or the Orange Tree or the Black Door or whatever. I went ahead and decided not to opt for the color in a title, but to go a very, I think, Kayla route, and chose books that had 2021's Pantone colors of the year on the cover, which is yellow and a gray. So that fulfilled those two prompts. The next book I read was actually a graphic novel, and that was Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur by Amy Reeder, Brandon Montclair, illustrated by Natasha Bustos, colored by Tamara Bonneville, lettered by VC's Travis Lanham, edited by Mark Panicia and Emily Shaw. So this yeah, this one was really fun. Basically, we're following this girl here, Lunella Lafayette, who is an inhuman preteen genius. There's something up with her DNA that she's trying to figure out, and she wants to learn how. However, she's a preteen, so like all the adults are kind of looking at her like, no, you need to go to school, you need to not stay out late at night, you need to like act like a child and not like a scientist, even though that's what she wants to do. She finds that it's really hard to kind of just conform to what society and her parents want her to do. And then an artifact ends up bringing a dinosaur into her life, as well as some other historic visitors. And Lunella is trying to find this artifact and figure out how it can help her. So this is the first volume, and that's kind of it in a nutshell. I don't have too much thoughts on it currently, just because it is the first volume. I do feel like the first volume is essentially like an introduction to get you hooked. So the story was ultimately interesting, but so many questions are still left unanswered. I absolutely love the artwork. I thought that it was fun and colorful And the fact that this is Marvel is really interesting to me. I'm typically a DC girl, not that it matters too much, but it's still fun. So yeah, it's just overall, it was fun. I do plan on getting more of this. Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur was a spontaneous pickup. I had wanted something quick and easy to read. It was, my month kind of started off a little slow and I felt it getting a little slumpy, so I picked this up just to kind of boost morale and get something fun in there. So the next book I read was How Long Till Black Future Month by N.K. Jameson. This is a collection of N.K. Jameson's stories, or shorter stories. I believe it's a lot of her earlier works. So a lot of these short stories are in fact stories that have turned into longer series, which I think is really interesting. So after reading N.K. Jameson's The City We Became in late 2020, I wanted to know more about their writing style, just because I did enjoy The City We Became, but had been told by other various readers of her that The City We Became was kind of an outlier to the rest of her work. So I wanted to grab a hold of this to see if I could glean any information from her and see if I enjoyed the rest of her work, just because her works are mostly series, and series are one of those things that once I figure out they're a series, it's really hard for me to want to commit to it. However, after reading this, I am wholly committed and I can't wait. There were a couple stories in here that I DNF'd just because the information just wasn't sinking in and I had the hardest time following them, but I think there were only 2 like that. Everything else in here I absolutely loved. And K. Jameson is quickly becoming one of my favorite authors. I gave this, I believe, 4 stars out of 5. How Long Till Black Future Month fulfilled the prompt of Black Future Month for VaLITines. The next book I read, I actually listened to through Libro FM. I have an affiliate link down below if you are at all interested in this audiobook website. Libro FM is kind of like bookshop.org in terms of when you buy from them, you help support small bookshops. So that's pretty cool. So I started my membership in February and was able to get this book to listen to. My affiliate link, if you're interested at all, basically if you sign up through that affiliate link, gives me an extra credit, but that's it. And anyone can, once you sign up, you can be an affiliate too. So, and once you refer more people, then you get free credits once they start paying into it. Basically, I read The Caped Crusade by Glenn Weldon. Listen to the audiobook, which is narrated by the author, and basically this is a nonfiction book that goes into Batman and the rise of nerd culture. So we follow Batman's story essentially, like his beginning, how he was created, why he was created, and then the turmoils of early DC comics and the different phases that Batman went through and able to sell comic books and to keep their quotas and to etc until we get to the Batman that we know today, which ultimately is like pop icon, multiple versions of him, and ultimately this has character that he has a huge fan base. So it was actually a really interesting read. I have enjoyed Batman comics for a while now, ever since high school, and it's constantly something that I am in and out of consistently. The different variations of the movies, because it's interesting to see how others think that Batman should be portrayed. So yeah, this was a really fun book. I think I only rated this, I believe, a 4, mostly because even though Glenn Weldon is queer, I believe he's also like a huge nerd fan. There was just certain aspects of his narration that distracted me. At first it was kind of funny, but the more he got into it, he's fantastic with voices. So his research was really impeccable in terms of him quoting from other people and doing voices in terms of like recognizing it as a different person that lent to his research. However, there were some stereotypes that I was like, what? So like to represent the nerd culture or the fandom that is Batman was the comic, like he sounded like the comic book guy from The Simpsons, or to represent LGBTQ, it was kind of the stereotypical gay voice and like the lispy, effeminate. I don't know. It was just, to me, kind of stereotypical, and it's like I get it, but like having to listen to it throughout the book. I mean, he does it in like occasionally, but it was consistent throughout the whole book, and I felt that was a little distracting and kind of counterintuitive of what he was talking about. So that I had a problem with. VaLITines fulfilled the prompt of sharing is caring, as it is was one of several options for the Buzzwordathon Readathon, which has gray and yellow, the Pantone colors of 2021. My next read was actually one of my arcs, and that was Spire Keeper's Daughter by Angeline. This I don't have a physical copy of yet, as it's not out yet. I'm not going to talk too much about it because I hope to get my review out closer to the release date, which is March 16th of 2021. So keep an eye out for that. But basically, I'm not going to talk too much about the synopsis either. I went into this book not knowing a thing, and mostly to fulfill mostly because I didn't want to, but also it helped fill the VaLITines prompt of blind date, I believe. Oh, skip a beat. And that is to skip the synopsis and start a book without knowing very much about it. So I started this book and was really excited about this book after seeing Erin from Erin's Library, Danny from Thunderbird Woman Reads, and Alexis from Little Lions Library's review of this book back in the winter of 2020, and didn't care about anything else. That was excitement enough for me to just want to read this book. So I was able to get an arc from NetGalley, so thank you so much to the publishers for that, Henry Holt and Company. I also was able to get an advanced listener's copy through Libro FM, so thank you so much for that. Not to say that the e-book was hard to get into at all, it was just that I appreciated the advanced listener's copy because Angeline does introduce Ojibwe language into the book, and for me, reading it without actually knowing how it's pronounced and questioning if the way I'm pronouncing it in my head is accurate was really distracting to me. So to be able to listen to this book was really awesome. I don't know for sure if this is accurate or not in terms of language. I would seek own voice reviews for that because this is an own voice book. Angeline is Sault Ste. Marie of Chippewa, and this book is about Donna Fontaine, who is an unenrolled biracial, but she's also Ojibwe of Sault Ste. Marie. So I am not own voices for that. Just because I'm an Indigenous of the Yurok tribe in California does not mean that we are monolithic. I highly suggest you seek out own voice reviews for that, though do know that I highly loved this book, so keep an eye out for my review for more details. Next was Get a Life, Chloe Brown by Talia Hibbert. This book is a contemporary romance following Chloe Brown after an incident that made her rethink her life. She made a list and able to get a life after living with chronic illness for several years. She realizes that she closed herself off to a lot of things that she typically had enjoyed, and has been wanting to push herself and able to see if she can enjoy them once again. So after moving out of her parents' house and into a flat or into an apartment, she enlists the help of her superintendent, and things ensue. So I don't typically enjoy romances. This was cute, but there was things that took me out of the story. So this one fulfilled opposites attract for the VaLITines prompt, mostly because realizing that I enjoy romance when they are kind of like a side plot in a otherwise not romance focused books. For instance, Recursion. I enjoyed the romance in that one, but so romance books, like that's the subject matter. That's the why the book was written. Can't say I enjoy them too much. They tend to disappoint me. There's some tropes in there in romance typically that I don't tend to enjoy or agree with. That it seems like it goes against popular opinion. This one was hard for me to get into first off because I didn't enjoy Chloe right off the bat. The same with the love interest, which I immediately read for Morgan. And then there was just things in here that I was just like, what? Just certain things that I was uncomfortable with. I don't tend to mind sex scenes. That's not the ones that I have a problem with. I don't tend to like blatant public affections. I am personally uncomfortable with, this felt very insta-lovey to me. I know that there was some kind of time spans. I think it was 3 months or something from when Chloe moved in to when they actually started talking, after initially talking about her getting into the apartment. However, I feel like there was no real buildup of friendship to love interest to lovers. It felt very fast paced to me, and just ultimately the initial awkwardness of we're friends but we're interested in each other, we're obviously like attracted to each other, and I'm gonna immediately start talking dirty to you and my body's gonna have very defined reactions to that. Felt very strange to me just because I have a particular comfort zone in which strangers or new friends cannot do that. There's a certain trust level that I want, and this didn't necessarily have it until the last quarter of the book. That's what I enjoyed of this book, was the last quarter of them trusting each other, of them getting to know each other. That's what I enjoyed, and that's when I started to enjoy more of the more intimate parts of this book. I do have to say that I didn't necessarily agree with, there was of course this mistaken thing that ends up drawing them apart. The last little bit of the book, it tends to be in most romance books, it usually has to do with some kind of miscommunication, and yes, that was kind of in there, but Redford's reaction with that bothered me, and I enjoyed the fact that Chloe took her time to fully, I wouldn't even say process, I feel like she didn't really process it. At least not that we were told. She was trying to move on from it, but not in a way that I would consider healthy. It was moving on as if they weren't getting back together. It was this, I'm putting it behind me, I'm moving forward type of deal, which is fine. But I didn't feel like she properly figured that out. And it was one of those things of just like, I wouldn't have necessarily, Redford's reaction definitely made me question things. I wouldn't have necessarily gone back to him. That was kind of scary. I don't know. If you enjoy this, good on you. I feel like romance is definitely one of those things that I am fairly particular about. I know what I enjoy, I know what I like, and this didn't necessarily do it for me. It was still cute, so I gave it a 3. I will be continuing on to the one with Danny Brown. I can't think of what it is. Accurate Age Eve Brown is the 3rd one that's coming out this year. I can't think of the one with Danny Brown, but the next one in this series. I will be continuing on with that because I've heard that one's a bit better than this one. The next book that I read was Earth Eater by Delores Reyes. This is a translated work, and it was translated by Julia Sanchez. So this was originally a book that was published in Spanish. Delores Reyes is a feminist and teacher with 7 kids in Buenos Aires. This one, I believe, takes place Argentina. It takes place in an unnamed slum in contemporary Argentina. We follow a young woman who finds herself wanting to eat earth, and that compulsion gives her visions of broken and lost lives, particularly of women or children who have gone missing. When news starts spreading of what she can do, people start bringing her earth to help find missing children, lost daughters, lost wives. Her first taste of earth was after her mother passed and she realized the truth of how her mother died. Content warnings for death of a parent, death of children, mention of death of children, gang violence. This one was really interesting to me. Ultimately, it's a story of a woman named, she's like a sister, she's a daughter, but ultimately she's Earth Eater. She doesn't have her own name, and that's how she feels with some of the women and children that end up going missing in this slum that she's trying to help find, which was ultimately really interesting. And as like the description of her eating earth, it felt familiar, but at the same time made my stomach heavy. Like, I don't particularly, like, as a kid, I think I ate dirt. It was one of those things that my mom thought was funny and took a picture of. I can't remember doing it. Reading the description was interesting. It made my stomach feel heavy. It made me feel sick almost. Particularly, it was, I don't know, it was just real interesting, but I could like envision it. The story itself was actually a really quick read. It was really interesting. I think there is a slight loss in translation, but I think Julia Sanchez did a really good job in translating. Not that I would know. I don't know Spanish. So again, talk to Own Voice Reviews or someone who is proficient in Spanish that are able to compare it. There is a note from the translator in the back that helps with that. I understood and I got some of the changes that had to be made in order for it to have an impact. I feel like it didn't have as much of an impact as it could have, but I still really enjoyed this and ultimately want to think more on it. I think I gave this a 3.5 star. It's a really beautiful book. Fit the VaLITines prompts for Love Language, which was a read a translated work, as well as Goo Goo Eyes, which is a book with a beautiful cover. This cover is stunning, as well as Touch, which is a book with an interesting texture, or a book that you believe will be touching. So this book actually this thing here actually has raised texture to it, so it's really fun. I enjoy texture a lot. The next book was Things in Jars by Jess Kidd. I guess I got this in January of 2020 and I completely forgot. Not that I forgot about it, but I noticed that I had it. I just thought it had been more than, I thought it came out multiple years ago, but 2020 did feel like multiple years, so who knows. But this book follows Brody Devine, a female detective extraordinaire in historic London. She is Irish descent and is confronted by a baffling puzzle. Kidnapped girl with extraordinary supernatural powers and inhuman details. Girl is a secret daughter of a pretty high class man in London, and Brody has like a need to find this child just to kind of prove herself. Her last case didn't go so well. She's finding that this particular case is digging out the past of London and her own past as well. She's aided in her search by a 7-foot tall housemaid, a melancholic tattooed covered ghost who claims to have ties to her past, but Brody can't figure out how or why. So blending darkness and light, history and folklore, Things in Jars is a spellbinding gothic mystery that collapses the boundary between fact and fairy tale to stunning effect and explores what it means to be human in inhuman times. So This was kind of a spur of the moment read as well, as it was looking for something available through my library, happened to see that this audiobook was available and picked it up and kind of just got sucked into it. There is content warning in here for several things. Medical malpractice, though it was a pretty nasty time to begin with. It was during the time in which people were studying anatomy by dissecting prisoners and unclaimed bodies that washed up from the Thames, so bear that in mind. There's also graphic depictions of medical surgeries, corpses, death, and injury. There's also assault and mentions of the death of a child. Like I said, I did listen to it, and it was narrated by Jacqueline Milne, who fantastic narrator. Enjoyed all of her voices ultimately, and that's something that I really appreciate about narrators, is when I can tell it's a different character. But this one in particular, I could tell the Irish accent of Bridie Devine, despite having trying to get rid of her Irish accent. There's still a little bit there, comparatively to like the villain in here, who was able to like manipulate her own voice to be able to suit her own needs, versus like devious men. I enjoyed this book. I enjoyed the fantastical folkloric elements to it. Another one that slightly surprised me, but because like once I understood what it was going into it, enjoy magic realism, I enjoy folklore. This was just ultimately just a fun story to read about. The villain was just, man, it had me guessing several times, and ultimately it was like, ooh, like when a villain can be like villainous for the sake of, yeah, and cleverly, I have to appreciate that. There was a couple things that, not that I didn't so much agree with. I apologize if you can hear my cat meowing. Not necessarily I didn't agree with it, just I wish there was more to it. For instance, the melancholic tattooed ghost, Ruby Doyle. This may be spoilers, but I feel like there should have been more there. Okay, my final book for February, I just finished this morning. And this is being filmed on the February 28th, and that is Nnedi Okorafor's Remote Control, that was released earlier this year. And basically, because it's a novella, I don't want to give you too much of the synopsis, but I will give you a bit of a blurb inside, which is, she's the adopted child of the Angel of Death. Beware of her, mind her, death guards her like one of its own. We follow Fatima, who forgets her name and realizes she has the power of death, and we just kind of follow her story as she wanders. And I really enjoyed it, but I didn't necessarily enjoy the ending. There is content warning for death of parents, death of a sibling, and assault, and death of animals. I really enjoyed the atmosphere of it. I really enjoyed the descriptions. It was really fun. There was at one point where like I had tears rolling down my cheeks because I felt for Fatima. I feel like this one would have benefited for being a longer book, in all honesty, but I really did enjoy it as a novella. I think I only gave it 3.5 stars because the ending to me was just kind of like, what? Because there was a hint. Yeah, I gave it 3.5 stars. So there was a hint of something throughout the whole book, and then it's like it didn't really take into effect at all until the very end of the book, and even then it kind of left open-ended. So it was like I didn't see a point to it really, but I did enjoy the story for the most part. Aside from that aspect, I feel like it was leading somewhere and then kind of fizzled out. But I did enjoy it, and I still enjoy Nnedi Okorafor's writing and hope to get into more of her works. I heard about this originally from Bear from Brody. They had a live show and they had recommended this book, or had said that they were looking forward to this book. It came to 2021 releases, so they put this on my radar, and that cover is just stunning, so I definitely wanted to pick it up because of that. This also met the prompts for VaLITines for This could also be for Black Future Month, for Afrofuturism. Words of Affirmation, which is to read a book blurb by a favorite author. Neil Gaiman ends up blurbing this on the back, but Neil Gaiman is one of my favorites as well, so that was pretty cool. So these are the books that I read for February. If you've read any of these, I'd love to hear your thoughts on them. Please comment in the comments down below. No spoilers, please. So if you do want to talk to me on any other platform, I am on a variety: Twitter, Instagram, Storygraph, Bookstagram. Otherwise, be sure to give this video a thumbs up. If you aren't subscribed yet, I highly suggest you hit the subscribe button, hit the little bell icon so you know when I upload more content. And I will also have Reyes awareness links down in the description down below as well for MMIWG2S, which is Murdered, Missing Indigenous Women, Girls, and Two-Spirit People. These are organizations and programs and that help collect data as well as help families of murdered, missing Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit people throughout Canada and the United States. And recently they're going into Mexico and Latinx territories, which is really cool. There is a huge need for this, particularly after reading Earth Eater. Throughout the countries, it is very much needed. So there are links to help you research that. Donation links, please share and donate where you can, as well as for Turnout, which is a LGBTQ organization down in the Bay Area of California that helped LGBTQ community with COVID relief as well as volunteer work. Check them out. Donate and share where you can. And otherwise, I hope that you are in the mental mindset to enjoy your reading. I'll see you again soon. Chew.